The thunder crashed as Tabitha Winters huddled beneath the overhanging roof of Silverton's general store, clutching her worn shawl tightly around her shoulders. The year was 1875, and the Colorado mining town had been her destination for 3 grueling weeks of travel. Rain pounded the dirt road, turning it into a river of mud that would make walking even more difficult with her twisted left leg. She'd been born with it, a defect that her mother claimed was God's punishment, though for what sin, Tabitha never knew. "You best get inside before you catch your death," called the shopkeeper, an elderly man with kind eyes who stood in the doorway. "Thank you, sir, but I haven't the money for a room just yet," Tabitha replied, forcing a smile. "I've come for work." "My cousin mentioned there might be opportunities here." The man's expression shifted to one of pity, a look Tabitha had grown to despise. "Work's hard to come by for a young woman in these parts, especially." His eyes drifted to her leg, then quickly away, "especially for a cripple." She finished for him, her voice stronger than she felt. At 22, Tabitha had endured enough sideways glances and whispered comments to last a lifetime. The shopkeeper had the decency to look ashamed. "I didn't mean it's all right, I've heard worse." She straightened her back. "I can cook, clean, and I read and write better than most school teachers. I just need a chance." Before the man could respond, the pounding of hooves splashed through the muddy street. 3 riders approached, their horses massive and powerful against the stormy backdrop. The leader, tall and broad-shouldered beneath a rain-slicked duster, reined his horse directly in front of the store. "Mr. Daniels," the rider called out to the shopkeeper. "Got those supplies ready? We need to head back to the ranch before this gets any worse." "Just finishing up, Mr. Oberlin. Come in out of that rain." The rider dismounted with the fluid grace of a man who'd spent his life in the saddle. As he stepped onto the porch, he removed his hat, revealing dark hair and a face weathered by sun and wind. His eyes, a startling blue, met Tabitha's, and for a moment neither spoke. "Quinn Oberlin," he said finally, offering a nod instead of his rain-soaked hand. "Tabitha Winters," she replied, fighting the urge to hide her leg behind her skirts as she often did when meeting strangers. His gaze took her in, lingering not on her leg as most did, but on her face. "You're new to Silverton?" It wasn't a question, but she nodded anyway. "Just arrived today." The shopkeeper emerged with parcels wrapped in oilcloth. "Mr. Oberlin, this young lady's looking for work. Says she can cook and such." Quinn Oberlin studied her with an intensity that made her heart quicken. "Is that so? Lost our cook last month, moved east to get married." He secured the packages to his saddle before turning back to her. "Ranch work is hard. Days start before dawn and end long after dark." "I'm no stranger to hard work, Mr. Oberlin," Tabitha replied, lifting her chin. "And I don't expect special treatment." A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "Didn't think you would." He glanced at the sky. "Storm's getting worse." "You got somewhere to stay tonight?" Tabitha hesitated, unwilling to admit her desperate circumstances. Quinn didn't wait for her answer. "Thought not." He turned to his companions. "Johnson, Riley, head back and tell Mrs. Farthing we've got a potential new cook. I'll bring Miss Winters along." "Mr. Oberlin, I haven't agreed to anything," Tabitha protested. "True enough, but you need shelter tonight and we need a cook. Seems like a fair arrangement for now." He retrieved a second horse from his companions, a gentle-looking mare. "Can you ride?" Tabitha swallowed. "Not well and not with." She gestured vaguely at her leg. Quinn nodded, seemingly unbothered. "You'll ride with me then." Before Tabitha could object, he'd gathered her meager belongings and secured them to the mare. Then, with surprising gentleness, he helped her mount his own horse before swinging up behind her. "Hold tight," he murmured, his breath warm against her ear as his arms came around her to take the reins. As they rode out of town, Tabitha found herself pressed against the solid warmth of his chest, wondering if she'd made a terrible mistake or the best decision of her life. The Oberlin Ranch sprawled across a verdant valley, 15 miles outside Silverton. By the time they arrived, the storm had passed, leaving behind a washed, clean world sparkling in the late afternoon sun. Tabitha had remained mostly silent during the journey, acutely aware of Quinn's proximity and strength. He'd asked few questions, seeming content with the sound of hoofbeats and the occasional comment about the land they passed through. The main house was larger than Tabitha had expected, a two-story structure of sturdy logs with a wide porch wrapping around three sides. Smoke curled from the stone chimney, promising warmth within. Several outbuildings dotted the property, and a corral held at least a dozen horses. "This is Rockingo," Quinn said as they approached. "Been in my family for 20 years. "It's beautiful," Tabitha replied honestly. After growing up in the crowded streets of St. Louis, the open space and rugged mountains took her breath away. Quinn dismounted first, then reached up to help her down. His hands spanned her waist, and for a moment he held her suspended before carefully lowering her to the ground. Tabitha winced slightly as her bad leg took her weight. "We'll get you settled inside," he said, noticing her discomfort but mentioning nothing about it. A woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on an apron. In her 50s, with silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, she had the no-nonsense air of someone who managed a household with military precision. "Mrs. Farthing," Quinn called out. "This is Miss Winters. She might be our new cook." Mrs. Farthing's shrewd eyes assessed Tabitha, lingering momentarily on her leg before meeting her gaze. "Can you make a decent stew, girl?" "Yes, madam, and bread, pies, and just about anything else you might want." The housekeeper's mouth twitched. "We'll see about that. Come along then." Tabitha gathered her skirts and followed, trying not to favor her leg too obviously. Inside, the house was unexpectedly refined, with polished wood floors, comfortable furniture, and shelves lined with books. A staircase curved up to the second floor, and several doorways led to other rooms. "Kitchen's through here," Mrs. Farthing said, leading the way. "You'll be cooking for Mr. Oberlin, his brother Wyatt, and about 10 ranch hands depending on the season. Breakfast at dawn, dinner at noon, supper at 6. You'll have Sundays to yourself." The kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, with a massive cast-iron stove, a pump at the sink, and ample workspace. Tabitha ran her hand along the smooth countertop, already imagining the meals she could prepare. "Your room's off the kitchen," Mrs. Farthing continued, opening a door to reveal a small but tidy space with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "Not much, but it's private." "It's perfect," Tabitha said, genuinely pleased. After sharing crowded quarters with her cousins for years, having her own room seemed luxurious. "Wages are $20 a month plus room and board," Quinn said from the doorway where he'd been quietly observing. "If that suits you." It was more than Tabitha had dared hope for. "It suits me very well, Mr. Oberlin." "Good." He nodded once. "We'll try it for a month, see how it works out for both of us." After he left, Mrs. Farthing helped Tabitha unpack her few belongings and explain the kitchen's organization. "Mr. Oberlin's a fair employer," she said as she demonstrated how to regulate the temperamental stove. "Expects hard work but treats his people right." "And his brother?" Tabitha asked. Mrs. Farthing's expression tightened. "Wyatt's different, younger, got a wild streak. Just mind yourself around him." Before Tabitha could inquire further, the back door swung open, and several ranch hands filed in, drawn by the promise of food. Mrs. Farthing had prepared a simple meal earlier, and the men helped themselves, eyeing Tabitha curiously but respectfully. "This here's Miss Winters," Mrs. Farthing announced. "She'll be taking over the cooking starting tomorrow. You lot mind your manners." A chorus of nods and mumbled greetings followed as the men filled their plates. Tabitha smiled nervously, noting their sun-darkened faces and calloused hands. These were working men, unconcerned with her disability as long as she could fill their bellies. That night, alone in her new room, Tabitha wrote in her journal by lamplight. "April 15, 1875, I've found employment at the Rockingo Ranch. The owner, Mr. Quinn Oberlin, seems fair if somewhat reserved. The accommodations are better than I dared hope. Perhaps here, where everyone works hard for their place, I might finally find somewhere I belong." She closed the journal and extinguished the lamp, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. For the first time in months, she fell asleep without worry gnawing at her heart. Morning came earlier than Tabitha was accustomed to. She woke to Mrs. Farthing's brisk knock, the sky outside her window barely lightening to gray. Despite her exhaustion, she dressed quickly, grateful that her room's proximity to the kitchen meant minimal walking before she'd had time to work the stiffness from her leg. "Men will be in soon," Mrs. Farthing said by way of greeting. "Coffee's brewing. They'll want eggs, bacon, biscuits, and potatoes. Think you can manage? Absolutely, Tabitha replied, tying an apron around her waist. For the next hour, she worked steadily, finding a rhythm in the well-organized kitchen. By the time Boots stomped on the porch outside, she had platters of food ready and biscuits browning in the oven. The ranch hands filed in, mumbling good mornings as they helped themselves to coffee. Quinn entered last, his hair damp from washing, shirt sleeves rolled up to reveal muscular forearms. He nodded to Tabitha, his expression unreadable, then took his place at the head of the long table. "Smells good," he said simply as she placed a plate before him. The meal passed in a blur of activity, serving, refilling coffee cups, pulling fresh biscuits from the oven. Tabitha was grateful for the kitchen's layout, which allowed her to minimize movement while keeping everything within reach. As the men finished and headed out to begin their day's work, Quinn lingered at the table, cradling his coffee cup. "Everything satisfactory?" he asked when they were alone. "Yes, thank you," Tabitha replied, gathering dishes. "Everyone's been very kind." He watched her work for a moment. "Your leg, does it pain you much?" The question, asked without preamble or pity, startled her. Most people pretended not to notice or avoided the subject entirely. "Some days are worse than others," she answered honestly. "Rain makes it ache, standing too long as well, but I've learned to manage." Quinn nodded thoughtfully. "There's a stool by the pantry. Use it when you need to. No sense suffering needlessly." Before she could respond, the back door banged open and a young man strode in. He resembled Quinn enough to be his brother, but where Quinn's features were weathered and serious, this man's face held a boyish charm and easy smile. "So it's true, we have a new cook," he exclaimed, grinning at Tabitha. "Wyatt Oberlin at your service." He swept an exaggerated bow. "Tabitha Winters," she replied, unable to help returning his smile. "Miss Winters to you," Quinn corrected, his tone sharper than Tabitha had yet heard from him. "And where have you been? We had fence to mend at dawn." Wyatt waved a dismissive hand, checking on the new foal. Mare was having trouble. He turned his attention back to Tabitha. "Any chance there's breakfast left for a starving man?" "Of course," Tabitha said, already moving to prepare a plate. Quinn stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "When you're done playing the charmer, saddle up. We've got work." He nodded once to Tabitha and left, his stride purposeful. Wyatt rolled his eyes dramatically. "Don't mind my brother, he was born serious. He seems dedicated," Tabitha offered, setting a plate before him. "That's one word for it." Wyatt dug into his food with enthusiasm. Between bites, he asked, "So what brings you to Silverton?" "Not exactly a place people just happen upon." Tabitha busied herself with dishes as she answered. "My parents died when I was 16. I lived with cousins in St. Louis after that, but it wasn't ideal. My cousin Martha mentioned Silverton was growing, thought I might find work here. Well, their loss is our gain. This is the best breakfast I've had in months." His easy compliment warmed her, but she'd learned long ago not to trust charm too readily. In her experience, those quick with flattery often had the shallowest intentions. "Thank you, Mr. Oberlin, but I suspect you'd say that about any meal you didn't have to cook yourself." Wyatt laughed, a rich sound that filled the kitchen. "You've got me there, and please call me Wyatt. Mr. Oberlin is my brother. I don't think your brother would approve." "All the more reason to do it," Wyatt said with a wink, rising from the table. "But I should go before he comes looking for me. He's been particularly bearish lately." After he left, Mrs. Farthing returned to help with the cleaning. "I see you've met the younger Mr. Oberlin," she said, her tone neutral. "He seems very different from his brother." Like night and day, those two, Quinn was forced to grow up fast after their parents died. "Took over the ranch at 23, raised Wyatt from a boy." She shook her head. "Sometimes I think he forgot to have a youth of his own." The information gave Tabitha a new perspective on Quinn's reserved manner. "How old is he now?" 32 this past winter. Wyatt's 24. Mrs. Farthing gave her a knowing look. "Neither one married, if you're wondering." Tabitha felt heat rise in her cheeks. "I wasn't, no need to fib, girl. It's natural to be curious." The housekeeper smiled slightly. "Now let's talk about what you'll need for dinner." The men work hard and they eat accordingly. The following days established a routine. Tabitha rose before dawn to prepare breakfast, spent the morning baking bread and preparing dinner, served the midday meal, then began preparations for supper. Despite the long hours, she found satisfaction in the work. The kitchen became her domain, a place where her leg mattered less than her skill with flour and butter. Quinn remained politely distant, speaking to her mainly about practical matters, supplies needed from town, the number of men to feed, preferences for certain dishes. Yet Tabitha often caught him watching her when he thought she wouldn't notice, his expression unreadable. Wyatt, by contrast, made a point of seeking her out. He'd linger after meals, telling stories that made her laugh, or bring wildflowers he claimed to have just happened upon during his rides. His attention was flattering, though Tabitha maintained a careful reserve. She'd learned early that men might flirt with the limping girl, but they rarely meant anything serious by it. A week into her employment, Tabitha was kneading bread dough when Quinn entered the kitchen through the back door. He carried a wooden object that she couldn't immediately identify. "Miss Winters," he said, nodding in greeting. "Got a moment?" "Of course, Mr. Oberlin." She wiped flour from her hands onto her apron. He placed the object on the table, a three-legged stool, but unlike the simple one already in the kitchen, this one had a padded leather seat and a polished finish. "Noticed you were using that old milking stool when your leg troubles you," he said, not quite meeting her eyes. "Thought this might be more comfortable, had it in the storeroom." Tabitha stared at the stool, then at Quinn. The thoughtfulness of the gesture caught her off guard. "Thank you," she said softly. "That's very kind," he shrugged, looking almost embarrassed. "Just practical. Need our cook in good working order." Before she could respond, he turned to leave, then paused at the door. "The apple pie yesterday, it was good, best I've had since my mother's." With that, he was gone, leaving Tabitha staring after him, a strange warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the heat of the stove. That evening, as she served supper, she found herself more aware of Quinn's presence than before. He sat at the head of the table, speaking little but listening intently to his men's reports on the day's work. There was a quiet authority in his manner, a confidence without arrogance that Tabitha found herself admiring. Wyatt, seated at Quinn's right, dominated the conversation with tales of a wild horse he'd spotted in the north pasture. "Beautiful creature," he enthused. "Black as midnight with a white star on his forehead. I'm going to catch him." "That stallion's been running these hills for years," one of the older ranch hands commented. "Many have tried to catch him, none succeeded." "None of them were me," Wyatt replied with a grin. Quinn shook his head slightly. "We have plenty of horses that need attention without chasing wild ones through the mountains." "Where's your sense of adventure, brother?" Wyatt's tone was light, but Tabitha detected an undercurrent of tension. "Not everything's about practicality." "Adventure doesn't keep the ranch running," Quinn replied evenly, "or pay the men." An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Tabitha quickly intervened, bringing out a fresh baked berry cobbler that drew appreciative murmurs and effectively changed the subject. Later, as she washed dishes, she heard boots on the porch and glanced up to see Quinn leaning against the doorframe watching her. "You shouldn't have to work this late," he said. "I don't mind, it's peaceful after the day's bustle." She dried her hands on a towel. "Was everything to your liking?" "More than satisfactory." He entered the kitchen fully, moving to stand near the stove where coffee still kept warm. "May I, please, help yourself?" He poured a cup, then, after a moment's hesitation, gestured to the table. "Would you join me, if you're not too tired?" Surprised, Tabitha nodded and took a seat. Quinn poured a second cup and placed it before her before sitting across the table. "Mrs. Farthing speaks highly of your work," he said after a moment. "She's been very helpful in showing me how things are done here." Quinn nodded, turning his cup slowly between his hands. "And how are you finding rocking?" "Oh, it's wonderful," Tabitha answered honestly. "I've never lived somewhere so beautiful. It grows on you." A small smile softened his features. "My father brought us here when I was 12. Wyatt was just 4. It was wilderness, then took years to build it into what you see now. You must be very proud of what you've accomplished." His eyes met hers, intense and searching. "I am. This land, it gets in your blood, becomes part of you." He paused. "Your family there in St. Louis still?" Tabitha looked down at her cup. "I have cousins there, but we're not close. My parents died of influenza when I was 16. After that, I was more of a burden than family to my relatives. Because of your leg." It wasn't a question, partly. "And partly because I was another mouth to feed." She shrugged, trying to appear unconcerned though the memories still stung. My cousin Martha took me in, but it was clear I wasn't welcome. I worked as a seamstress, gave most of my earnings to help with expenses, but it was never enough. Quinn's jaw tightened. Some people lack common decency. They had their own troubles, Tabitha said, though she appreciated his indignation on her behalf. But when Martha mentioned Silverton was growing, I saved every penny until I had enough for the journey. I needed to make my own way. That takes courage, Quinn said quietly. Coming to a strange place alone or desperation, she replied with a small smile, but I'm glad I came. They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than Tabitha would have expected. Quinn spoke of the challenges of ranching in the high country, the harsh winters and dry summers. He described his plans for expanding their cattle operation and improving the bloodlines of their horses. Though he spoke modestly, Tabitha could hear the pride and passion in his voice. When he finally rose to leave, Quinn hesitated, as if wanting to say something more. Instead, he simply nodded. Thank you for the coffee, Miss Winters, and the conversation. You're welcome, Mr. Oberlin, anytime. After he left, Tabitha remained at the table, reflecting on their conversation. Quinn Oberlin was not what she'd initially thought, not simply stern and reserved, but thoughtful, intelligent, and deeply committed to his responsibilities. And she admitted to herself, more handsome than she'd allowed herself to notice, especially when that rare smile transformed his face. But such thoughts were dangerous. A man like Quinn would want a whole woman, not one with a twisted leg who could never be a proper rancher's wife. And regardless of his kindness toward her, she'd seen no indication that he viewed her as anything more than an employee. Still, as she readied for bed that night, Tabitha found herself humming a tune her mother used to sing, something she hadn't done in years. The next morning brought clear skies and the promise of warmth after weeks of spring chill. As Tabitha worked in the kitchen, Wyatt appeared, dressed for riding in a leather vest over his shirt, chaps, and a bandana loosely tied around his neck. Good morning, Tabitha, he said, helping himself to coffee. He'd long since abandoned formality despite Quinn's disapproval. Good morning. You're up early, going after that wild stallion today. His eyes sparkled with excitement. Want to come watch? I could saddle a gentle mare for you, Tabitha laughed, shaking her head. I have bread to bake and dinner to prepare. Besides, I'm not much of a rider, because of your leg. When she nodded, he shrugged. That shouldn't stop you. I could teach you. Another time, perhaps. Wyatt leaned against the counter, watching her work. You know, you're different from most women I've met. They usually jump at any invitation I offer. Perhaps I'm just more dedicated to my position, Tabitha replied, trying to keep her tone light, though his comment bordered on conceit. Or perhaps you've already set your sights elsewhere. Wyatt's gaze turned speculative. I've noticed how you look at my brother. Tabitha nearly dropped the bowl she was holding. I don't know what you mean. No, I've seen the way your eyes follow him when he enters a room, the way you smile when he speaks to you. Mr. Oberlin is my employer, she said firmly, feeling heat rise in her cheeks. Nothing more. Wyatt pushed away from the counter, grinning. If you say so, but I should warn you, Quinn hasn't looked twice at a woman since Sarah Miller rejected his proposal 5 years ago, said she couldn't bear the isolation of ranch life. The revelation sent an unexpected pang through Tabitha's heart. I wasn't aware of Mr. Oberlin's personal history, nor is it my business. Just thought you should know. Wyatt grabbed an apple from the bowl on the table. Quinn's a good man, but he's closed himself off, puts everything into this ranch, nothing into living. He took a bite of the apple, speaking around it. Me, on the other hand, I believe in enjoying life while you can. Before Tabitha could respond, the back door opened, and Quinn entered. His eyes narrowed slightly at the sight of his brother lounging in the kitchen. Thought you'd be saddled up by now, he said. Johnson and Riley are waiting. Just getting some sustenance for the hunt, Wyatt replied, holding up the apple. He winked at Tabitha. Think about what I said. After he left, Quinn turned to Tabitha, his expression questioning. Everything all right, fine, she replied, turning back to her work to hide her flushed cheeks. Your brother was just being friendly. Something like concern flickered across Quinn's face. Wyatt can be overly friendly at times. If he ever makes you uncomfortable, he doesn't, Tabitha assured him quickly. He's been nothing but kind. Quinn nodded, though he didn't look entirely convinced. I'll be in town today. Need anything from the mercantile? They discussed supplies for a few minutes, the earlier awkwardness fading. As he prepared to leave, Quinn paused. "Would you like anything for yourself? Books, perhaps. Noticed you reading that worn novel of yours several evenings." The fact that he'd noticed such a detail surprised her. "I would love something new to read if it's not too much trouble." "No trouble at all." His voice softened. "Any preferences?" "I enjoy stories of adventure and poetry," she smiled shyly. "Escape, I suppose." Quinn's eyes held hers for a long moment. "We all need that sometimes," he said quietly before bidding her good day. After he left, Tabitha found herself distracted as she worked, her thoughts alternating between Quinn's thoughtfulness and Wyatt's warning about his brother's closed heart. She had no business thinking of either man as anything other than her employer and his brother, she reminded herself sternly. Yet as the morning progressed, she couldn't help but wonder what sort of book Quinn might choose for her. By mid-afternoon, the men had returned from their morning work for dinner. Wyatt was notably absent, still out on his quest for the wild stallion. As Tabitha served the hearty stew she'd prepared, one of the older ranch hands, a weathered man named Peterson, mentioned storm clouds building in the west. "Could be a bad one," he commented. "Barometers falling fast." Another hand nodded agreement. "Winds picking up too. Youngster best get back before it hits." Worry creased the foreheads of several men. Mountain storms could develop quickly and turn dangerous, especially in the higher elevations where Wyatt had gone hunting for the wild horse. The meal continued with subdued conversation, the men eating quickly before heading back out to secure equipment and animals before the storm hit. Quinn, who had returned from town just before dinner, remained at the table after the others left, his expression growing more concerned as he glanced out the window at the darkening sky. "He should have been back by now," he said, almost to himself. Tabitha, clearing dishes, paused beside him. "Perhaps he found shelter somewhere." Quinn shook his head. "There's nothing in that direction except the old McCullough cabin, and it's more ruin than shelter these days." He stood abruptly. "I'm going to look for him, but the storm is exactly why I need to find him." Quinn was already moving toward the door. "If he's injured or lost." Tabitha followed him onto the porch where the wind whipped at her skirts and loosened tendrils of hair from her bun. "At least take someone with you. It's too dangerous to go alone. The men are securing the ranch." "I can't spare them." He turned to face her, his eyes reflecting the turbulent sky. "Don't worry, I know these mountains better than anyone." Before she could protest further, he strode toward the barn. Minutes later, he emerged on horseback, a rifle secured to his saddle and saddlebags likely packed with emergency supplies. As he rode past the house, he raised a hand in farewell, then urged his horse into a gallop toward the gathering storm. Tabitha watched until he disappeared into the trees, an inexplicable dread settling in her heart. She'd known these men barely 2 weeks, yet the thought of either of them injured or worse in the mountains caused her physical pain. Mrs. Farthing appeared beside her, her usual stoic expression replaced by worry. "Come inside, girl. Standing out here won't bring them back sooner." For the next several hours, Tabitha tried to focus on preparing supper, but her attention constantly drifted to the windows. The storm hit with full-force rain lashing against the glass, thunder shaking the house to its foundations, lightning illuminating the yard in brief, stark flashes. The ranch hands who came in for the evening meal were soaked and somber, their conversation revolving around the missing Oberlin brothers. "Quinn will find him," Peterson said with conviction. "Never known a man with a better sense of direction or more determination." Others nodded agreement, but as the evening wore on with no sign of either man, even the most optimistic grew quiet. After the men had eaten and returned to the bunkhouse, Tabitha remained in the kitchen, unable to retire while 2 men were still out in the storm. Mrs. Farthing brought her a shawl as the night air grew chill. "You should rest," she said gently. "There's nothing you can do now but pray." "I'll just wait a little longer," Tabitha replied, settling onto a chair near the window. The housekeeper sighed. "Stubborn girl." "Well, if you're determined to keep vigil, at least have some tea." She bustled about preparing it, then sat across from Tabitha. "You've grown fond of them, haven't you, the brothers?" Tabitha stared into her teacup. "They've both been kind to me, in different ways, I'd wager." Mrs. Farthing's shrewd eyes studied her. "Wyatt's charm is easy to like, Quinn's harder to know, but worth the effort." "It doesn't matter," Tabitha said softly. "I'm just the cook." Nonsense. I've seen how the elder Mr. Oberlin looks at you when he thinks no one's watching. Like a man seeing sunlight after a long winter. Tabitha shook her head in disbelief. You're mistaken. Why would a man like him look twice at someone like me? Mrs. Farthing's expression softened. Because he sees what I see, a strong young woman with more courage and kindness than most people possess. That leg of yours doesn't define you, girl, no matter what others have made you believe. Before Tabitha could respond, the sound of hoofbeats penetrated the storm's roar. She was on her feet instantly, hobbling to the door despite the pain in her leg after sitting so long. Through sheets of rain, she could make out a single horse approaching, a dark figure slumped in the saddle. As it drew closer, she saw it was Quinn's mount, but he wasn't riding alone. Another form was draped across the saddle in front of him, Wyatt, apparently unconscious. Tabitha called for help, and ranch hands emerged from the bunkhouse, rushing to assist. They helped Quinn dismount, then carefully lifted Wyatt from the horse. In the light spilling from the doorway, Tabitha could see blood matting Wyatt's hair and soaking Quinn's shirt. "Get him inside," Quinn ordered, his voice hoarse with exhaustion. "Careful of his leg, think it's broken." They carried Wyatt into the house and laid him on the dining table as Mrs. Farthing quickly cleared it. The younger Oberlin's face was ghostly pale beneath the dirt and blood, his breathing shallow. "Found him at the base of a ravine," Quinn explained as he cut away Wyatt's torn clothing. "Horse must have spooked in the storm and thrown him. He was unconscious when I got there." Tabitha moved to help, bringing clean water and cloths. "We should send for the doctor." Quinn shook his head grimly. No one could make it to town in this storm, and by the time they reached the doctor and brought him back. He didn't finish the sentence, but his meaning was clear. For the next hour they worked to clean and treat Wyatt's injuries. His right leg was indeed broken, the bone thankfully not protruding through the skin. Quinn, with Peterson's help, set it as best he could, using pieces of a wooden crate as splints. The head wound was their greatest concern, a deep gash that continued to seep blood despite their efforts to staunch it. Through it all, Wyatt remained unconscious, occasionally moaning but never waking. When they'd done all they could, Quinn had the men carry his brother upstairs to his bedroom. As they left, Quinn sank into a chair at the now cleared table, his face haggard with worry and fatigue. Tabitha brought him a towel for his rain-soaked hair and a cup of hot coffee laced with whiskey. "You should change into dry clothes before you catch your death," she said softly. He looked up at her, his blue eyes dark with emotion. "I almost didn't find him if I'd been even an hour later. But you weren't. You found him and he's alive because of you." Quinn ran a hand over his face. "He never should have been out there alone. I knew that storm was coming. I should have insisted he take someone with him." "Wyatt makes his own choices," Tabitha said gently. "From what little I know of him, I doubt he would have listened even if you had insisted." A ghost of a smile touched Quinn's lips. "You've got him pegged already. Always been that way, headstrong, determined to do things his own way." The smile faded. "But he's my responsibility. Has been since our parents died." "You were hardly more than a boy yourself then," Tabitha reminded him. "You've done well by him, giving him a home, a place in the world." Quinn's eyes met hers, vulnerable in a way she hadn't seen before. "Thank you for that, and for your help tonight. I did very little." "You were here," he said simply. "That mattered." The intensity of his gaze made her heart quicken, and for a moment she thought he might say something more. Instead, he rose wearily to his feet. "I should sit with him, in case he wakes. I can take turns with you," Tabitha offered. "You need rest too." Quinn looked like he might refuse, then nodded. "Wake me in a few hours then, or sooner if there's any change." After he left, Tabitha sank into a chair, suddenly aware of her own exhaustion. The night's events had revealed a side of Quinn she hadn't fully appreciated before: his unwavering courage, his devotion to his brother, the depth of his sense of responsibility. She found herself admiring him even more, and that realization brought both warmth and disquiet to her heart. For the next 3 days, Wyatt remained mostly unconscious, waking only briefly and incoherently before slipping back into darkness. Quinn rarely left his side except when Tabitha insisted on taking her turn watching over the injured man. The doctor finally arrived on the second day, confirming what they already knew: a severe concussion, broken leg, bruised ribs, and numerous cuts and abrasions. He left medicines and instructions, but warned that only time would tell if Wyatt would fully recover. During her vigils at Wyatt's bedside, Tabitha often read aloud from the book Quinn had brought her from town, a collection of poetry by Tennyson. It had been wrapped in brown paper with a simple note, "For your moments of escape." The thoughtfulness of the gift, selected despite his concerns about the approaching storm, touched her deeply. On the morning of the fourth day, Tabitha entered Wyatt's room to relieve Quinn and found him asleep in the chair beside the bed, his head resting at an uncomfortable angle. Wyatt, however, was awake, his eyes clear for the first time since the accident. "Well, this is a pleasant sight to wake to," he said weakly when he saw her, his voice barely above a whisper. "Wyatt, you're awake." She moved quickly to his side, touching his forehead to check for fever. "How do you feel?" "Like I fell off a mountain." He managed a shadow of his usual grin. "Which I gather I did. You gave us all quite a scare, especially my brother, it seems." Wyatt glanced at Quinn's sleeping form. "He looks terrible." "He's barely slept since he brought you home," Tabitha said. "Wouldn't leave your side except when forced." Wyatt's expression sobered. "Always the protector, even when I don't deserve it." He shifted slightly and winced. "That wild stallion got the better of me, I suppose. The horse spooked in the storm. It could have happened to anyone. But it happened to me, adding to my long list of foolish exploits." Wyatt's voice held an unfamiliar note of self-reproach. "Quinn was right, I should have left that horse alone." Tabitha adjusted his pillows, making him more comfortable. "Your brother never said I told you so, if that's what you're worried about. He was just concerned for you." "He's always concerned for me, has been since I was a child." Wyatt's eyes, though tired, were more serious than she'd ever seen them. "Did you know he gave up a chance to attend university in Denver, had a scholarship and everything, stayed here instead because I needed him? He mentioned your parents died when you were young. It couldn't have been easy for either of you." "It wasn't, but Quinn bore the brunt of it, became a man overnight." Wyatt's gaze shifted to his brother again. "Sometimes I wonder if he resents me for it." "I don't think resentment is in his nature," Tabitha said softly. "At least not toward you." "No, I suppose not. That's not Quinn's way." Wyatt reached for the glass of water on the bedside table and Tabitha helped him drink. After a few sips, he continued, "He thinks I don't appreciate what he's built here, but I do, I just—" He trailed off, searching for words. "You need your own path," Tabitha finished for him. Wyatt looked at her with surprise. "Exactly. Something that's mine, not handed down or shared with my perfect older brother." He gave a weak laugh that turned into a grimace of pain. "Though I'm making a mess of finding it, aren't I?" "You're young yet. There's time." Their conversation had grown loud enough to rouse Quinn, who stirred and opened his eyes. For a moment he looked disoriented, then his gaze found Wyatt's conscious face and relief washed over his features. "You're back," he said simply, moving to the edge of the bed. "Apparently," Wyatt replied. "Thanks to you, from what I gather." Quinn shook his head dismissively. "How do you feel?" "Like I've been trampled by that stallion rather than just thrown by him." A smile briefly lit Quinn's tired face. "Well, your sense of humor survived intact at least." He glanced at Tabitha, who had moved toward the door to give the brothers privacy. "Miss Winters, would you mind asking Mrs. Farthing to prepare some broth? Wyatt needs to get his strength back." "Of course." She smiled at both men before leaving, her heart lighter than it had been in days. Over the next week, Wyatt's recovery progressed steadily. He regained his strength enough to sit up in bed, then to move to a chair by the window, though he chafed at the confinement. Quinn returned to his duties around the ranch but checked on his brother frequently. Tabitha found herself spending more time than strictly necessary in Wyatt's room, bringing him meals, reading to him, or simply providing company to distract him from his frustration. During these visits, she discovered a depth to Wyatt she hadn't previously recognized. Beneath his carefree demeanor lay intelligence and sensitivity, along with genuine remorse for the worry he'd caused. They spoke of books, of his childhood on the ranch, of her life in St. Louis. He never mentioned her disability, treating her no differently than he would any other woman, a courtesy that, while appreciated, somehow felt less meaningful than Quinn's straightforward acknowledgement and practical assistance. One afternoon, as she read to him from a newspaper Quinn had brought from town, Wyatt interrupted her. "He fancies you, you know." Tabitha lowered the paper. "I beg your pardon, Quinn, he has feelings for you." Wyatt's expression was uncharacteristically serious. I've known my brother all my life, and I've never seen him look at a woman the way he looks at you." Heat rushed to Tabitha's cheeks. "That's absurd. Mr. Oberlin is simply a kind employer." "Is that what you tell yourself?" Wyatt leaned forward in his chair, wincing slightly at the movement. "I've seen how he watches when you enter a room, how he listens more intently when you speak. He brought you that book of poetry, for heaven's sake. Quinn never gives gifts without significant meaning behind them." Tabitha stood, flustered by his words and the hope they kindled despite her better judgment. "You're imagining things. Why would a man like your brother be interested in someone like me?" Wyatt's eyes softened. "Because you're intelligent, kind, and braver than most men I know. And because Quinn sees past limitations that others fixate on." He paused. "The question is, do you have feelings for him?" "This conversation is highly inappropriate," Tabitha said, gathering the newspaper. "You should rest now." As she turned to leave, Wyatt called after her, "He deserves happiness, Tabitha. And I think you might be the one to give it to him." His words followed her down the stairs and into the kitchen, where she tried to lose herself in the routine of dinner preparations. Yet her thoughts kept returning to Quinn, his quiet strength, his unexpected kindnesses, the rare smiles that transformed his serious face. Could Wyatt be right? And if he was, what did it mean for her? That evening, as she carried a tray of coffee to the porch where Quinn often sat after supper, she found him examining a saddle, his strong hands working oil into the leather with methodical care. "Coffee," she offered, setting the tray on a small table. He looked up, and something in his expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight upturn of his lips, made her heart beat faster. "Thank you. Join me." Tabitha settled into the chair beside him, grateful that the growing darkness hid her flushed cheeks. For a few moments, they sat in companionable silence, watching as the last light faded from the western sky and stars began to appear. "Wyatt says he'll be trying to get out of bed on his own soon," she said finally. Quinn chuckled. "Sounds like him, never could keep still for long." He set the saddle aside and reached for his coffee. "Thank you for spending time with him. It's made his confinement more bearable. I've enjoyed it. He's good company." "He is that." Quinn's voice held affection tinged with something like resignation. "Always been able to charm people, make friends easily, not like me." "You have different strengths," Tabitha said gently. "People respect you, trust your judgment. That's just as valuable as charm." Quinn glanced at her, surprise evident in his features. "That's generous of you to say." "It's the truth." She hesitated, then added, "Wyatt told me about the scholarship you gave up, to attend university in Denver." A shadow crossed Quinn's face. "That was a long time ago. It was a significant sacrifice," he shrugged, turning his cup between his hands. "It wasn't a sacrifice. Wyatt needed me, the ranch needed me. There was no real choice to make. Still, to give up your own dreams. I found new ones." His eyes met hers, steady and earnest. "Building this place, making it successful, that became my dream, and I don't regret it." Tabitha nodded, understanding. "It's a beautiful dream. You've created something remarkable here." Quinn studied her face in the dim light from the windows. "What about you? What dreams did you have before life intervened?" The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked about her dreams before. "I wanted to teach," she admitted. "I love books, learning. I thought I might open a small school someday." "Why didn't you?" "No one would hire a teacher with a limp," she said matter-of-factly. "Parents wouldn't want their children taught by someone different." Quinn's jaw tightened. "People can be cruel in their ignorance." "Yes, they can," she smiled sadly. "But I've learned to make my way regardless. Not everyone sees the limp first. Some of us see the courage it takes to walk with it," Quinn said quietly, "the strength of character it builds." Their eyes met, and in that moment, something shifted between them, a recognition, an understanding that transcended words. Tabitha felt her breath catch as Quinn leaned slightly toward her, his gaze dropping briefly to her lips. The screen door banged open, shattering the moment. Peterson stepped onto the porch, then stopped abruptly when he saw them sitting close together. "Sorry to interrupt, boss," he said, tipping his hat to Tabitha. "But Johnson just rode in, says the north fence line's down again and some of the cattle have strayed into Harker's property." Quinn straightened, the rancher replacing the man of a moment before. "I'll handle it. Tell Johnson to ready fresh horses." As Peterson left, Quinn rose reluctantly. "Duty calls." "Of course." Tabitha stood as well, suddenly awkward. "It's getting late anyway." I should check on Wyatt before retiring. Quinn nodded, then reached out to take her hand. His touch was warm, calloused from years of ranch work, yet gentle. Thank you for the coffee and the conversation. You're welcome, she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He held her hand a moment longer than necessary, his thumb brushing lightly across her knuckles, then released it and turned to go. At the steps, he paused and looked back. Tabitha, he said, using her given name for the first time, there's a social in town next Saturday. Would you consider attending? With me, joy blossomed in her chest, unexpected and sweet. I would like that very much. A genuine smile lit his face, transforming it completely. Good, that's good. With a final nod, he descended the steps and strode toward the barn, his posture straighter, his step lighter than when he'd first sat down with the saddle. Tabitha remained on the porch long after he'd gone, her hand still tingling where he'd touched it, her heart racing with possibilities she'd never allowed herself to consider before. The week leading up to the social passed in a blur of anticipation and nerves. Tabitha found herself paying extra attention to her appearance each morning, pinching color into her cheeks and arranging her hair more carefully than usual. She caught Quinn watching her more openly now, his gaze warm with admiration that made her blush like a schoolgirl. Wyatt noticed the change between them immediately. About time, he remarked during one of her visits. I was beginning to think you were both blind. Don't tease, Tabitha admonished, though she couldn't suppress a smile. It's just a social. Nothing is just anything with my brother, Wyatt replied. He doesn't do things halfway. The day before the social, Mrs. Farthing approached Tabitha as she needed bread dough. Got something for you, she said, placing a box on the kitchen table. Been saving it for a special occasion. Inside the box lay a dress of deep blue fabric, simple but beautifully made with lace at the collar and cuffs. Tabitha gasped, running her fingers over the soft material. Mrs. Farthing, I couldn't possibly, nonsense. My daughter sent it last Christmas, but it's too young a style for an old woman like me. The housekeeper's eyes twinkled. Besides, blue suits you better than me. Brings out those eyes of yours. Tears pricked at Tabitha's eyes. Thank you, it's beautiful. Mrs. Farthing patted her shoulder. You deserve a bit of happiness, girl, both of you do. Saturday dawned clear and warm, a perfect late spring day. Tabitha spent the morning completing her usual tasks, then bathed and dressed with care. The blue dress fit as if made for her, the hem long enough to disguise the worst of her limp. She arranged her hair in a more elaborate style than usual, securing it with tortoiseshell combs that had been her mother's. When she emerged from her room, Wyatt was sitting in the kitchen, his broken leg propped on a chair. He whistled appreciatively. If my brother wasn't already smitten, that dress would do the trick. Tabitha blushed. Is he ready? Outside with the buggy and looking more nervous than I've seen him since his first cattle auction. Wyatt grinned. Go easy on him, he's out of practice with courting. This isn't courting, Tabitha protested weakly. Wyatt's laugh followed her out the door. Tell yourself that if it helps. Quinn waited beside a polished buggy, dressed in his Sunday best dark trousers, a crisp white shirt, and a vest that emphasized his broad shoulders. He'd trimmed his beard and slicked back his hair, and as he turned to watch her approach, Tabitha felt her breath catch at how handsome he looked. His eyes widened as he took in her appearance, a look of appreciation warming his features. Miss Winters, he said, his voice deeper than usual. You look beautiful. Thank you, Mr. Oberlin, she smiled shyly. You look very handsome yourself. He offered his hand to help her into the buggy, his touch lingering as she settled onto the seat. As they drove away from the ranch, Tabitha felt a lightness in her heart that had been absent for as long as she could remember. The ride to town passed quickly, filled with easy conversation. Quinn pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the early days of settlement. He seemed more relaxed than she'd ever seen him, laughing more freely, his usual reserve softened by the occasion. Silverton was transformed for the social. Bunting decorated the main street, and tables laden with food lined the area in front of the church. A makeshift dance floor had been constructed in the center of town, and a small band was already playing as couples swirled across the wooden planks. As Quinn helped Tabitha down from the buggy, she felt a momentary pang of anxiety. Socializing had never been easy for her, too many pitying glances, too many whispers behind hands. As if sensing her discomfort, Quinn placed her hand firmly in the crook of his arm. "Shall we?" he asked, his steady gaze reassuring. With a grateful nod, she allowed him to lead her toward the gathering. People turned to look as they passed, curious about the newcomer on Quinn Oberlin's arm. Tabitha forced herself to walk as naturally as possible, though she knew her limp was more pronounced after the buggy ride. Quinn introduced her proudly to everyone. They met the storekeeper who remembered her from her arrival, the banker and his wife, the blacksmith and his family. To her surprise, people seemed more interested in her connection to Quinn than in her disability. Several women welcomed her warmly, asking about life at the ranch and expressing admiration for her taking on the cooking for so many men. "Quinn hasn't brought anyone to a social in years," the banker's wife confided. "You must be very special indeed." As the evening progressed, Tabitha found herself enjoying the gathering more than she'd anticipated. The food was delicious, the company pleasant, and Quinn remained attentively by her side. When the band began playing a waltz, however, she tensed. "Would you care to dance?" Quinn asked, offering his hand. Tabitha shook her head. "I can't. My leg can support you just fine with the right partner," he finished for her. "Trust me." Before she could protest further, he led her onto the dance floor. Placing one hand at her waist and taking her other hand in his, he began to guide her in a simplified version of the waltz, supporting her weight when needed and adjusting his steps to accommodate her uneven gait. "See," he murmured as they moved slowly around the floor. "Not so difficult." Tabitha looked up at him in wonder. No one had ever asked her to dance before, let alone made it possible for her to do so. "How did you know we could?" "I didn't," he admitted, "but I wanted to try. Some things are worth the risk." The significance of his words wasn't lost on her. As they continued to dance, the rest of the gathering seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them moving together in the warm evening light. When the music ended, Quinn didn't release her immediately. Instead, he gazed down at her with an intensity that made her heart race. "Would you like to take a walk? It's a beautiful night." They strolled toward the edge of town, where the noise of the social receded and the vast expanse of star-strewn sky spread above them. Quinn led her to a small bench beneath a cottonwood tree, helping her sit before taking his place beside her. For a moment, they sat in companionable silence, gazing at the stars. Then Quinn turned to face her, his expression serious. "I need to tell you something, Tabitha." The use of her first name sent a shiver through her. "Yes. When you first came to Rockingham, I thought you were just going to be our cook. A good one, I hoped, but still just an employee." He paused, searching for words. "But these past weeks, getting to know you, seeing your strength, your kindness, your determination, you've become much more than that to me." Tabitha's breath caught in her throat. "Quinn, please let me finish. I'm not good with words like Wyatt is." He took her hand in his. "I find myself thinking about you when we're apart, looking forward to our conversations. Admiring not just your beauty, though you are beautiful, but your mind, your spirit, your heart." He moved closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know it's soon, too soon maybe. And I know you might not feel the same, but I needed you to know that I care for you, Tabitha, deeply." Joy and disbelief warred within her. "I don't understand," she whispered. "You could have any woman. Why would you choose someone broken like me?" Pain flashed across Quinn's face. "Is that truly how you see yourself? As broken?" "It's how everyone sees me," she replied, tears threatening. "The limping girl, good enough to cook and clean but not to love." "Not everyone," he said firmly. "Not me." He cupped her cheek with his free hand. "You walk with a limp, yes. But that doesn't define you any more than the scar on my back defines me. You have a scar from a ranch accident years ago. Does knowing that make me broken in your eyes? Of course not. Then why would your leg make you broken in mine?" His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped down her cheek. "The first time I saw you standing in the rain, chin up despite everything, I admired your courage, and every day since I've found more to admire." He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "You walk right into my heart, Tabitha Winters, limp and all." Before she could respond, his lips met hers in a kiss so gentle it brought fresh tears to her eyes. She found herself responding instinctively, her hand moving to his shoulder as the kiss deepened, becoming a promise of possibilities neither had dared hope for. When they finally parted, Quinn rested his forehead against hers. "I'm not asking for an answer tonight, just for a chance to court you properly. To show you that you deserve to be cherished exactly as you are." Tabitha's heart felt too full for words. Instead, she answered by initiating another kiss, pouring into it all the feelings she'd been afraid to acknowledge: her admiration for his strength and integrity, her appreciation for his kindness, her growing love for the man who saw beyond her limitations to the woman beneath. Under the vast Colorado sky, with the distant sounds of the social mingling with the whisper of leaves above them, Tabitha felt something long dormant within her bloom to life: hope for a future brighter than any she had dared to imagine. The ride back to the ranch was quiet but charged with new awareness. Quinn held the reins in one hand, his other arm around Tabitha, drawing her close against the evening chill. They spoke little, both processing the shift in their relationship, content for now to simply be together. At the ranch, lights still burned in the main house despite the late hour. As Quinn helped Tabitha down from the buggy, Wyatt appeared on the porch, his crutches thumping against the wooden boards. "About time you two returned," he called, grinning. "Was beginning to think you'd eloped." Quinn shook his head at his brother's teasing, but his hand remained at Tabitha's waist, a public declaration of his intentions that wasn't lost on Wyatt. "I see the evening was a success," Wyatt commented as they joined him on the porch. His smile held genuine happiness, though Tabitha thought she detected a hint of wistfulness in his eyes. "It was a lovely social," she replied, feeling her cheeks warm. "I'm sure it was." Wyatt's gaze moved between them, his expression softening. "Well, don't let me keep you from saying your good nights. I just wanted to make sure you got home safely." After Wyatt retreated inside, Quinn turned to Tabitha, taking both her hands in his. "Thank you for tonight," he said softly. "It meant more than I can say." "For me as well," she replied, finding courage in the warmth of his gaze. "I never thought someone like you could care for someone like me. Then I'll spend as long as it takes convincing you otherwise." He leaned down to kiss her again, a gentle promise sealed under the star-filled sky. In the weeks that followed, Tabitha found herself living in a state of joyful disbelief. Quinn courted her with a thoroughness that both charmed and overwhelmed her, bringing wildflowers for her kitchen table, sharing books from his personal library, taking her on picnics to his favorite spots on the ranch. He was never ostentatious in his attentions, understanding that grand gestures would only make her uncomfortable. Instead, he showed his growing affection through consistent, thoughtful care. Wyatt watched their blossoming relationship with evident approval, though as his recovery progressed and he regained his mobility, Tabitha sensed a restlessness in him. One evening, as she helped him exercise his healing leg on the porch, he confided his thoughts. "I'm thinking of leaving Rockingo," he said abruptly, Tabitha's hand stilled on his leg. "Leaving? But why? This is your home." "It's Quinn's home," Wyatt corrected gently. "It's always been his dream, not mine." He gazed out at the mountains, painted gold by the setting sun. "That accident made me realize some things. I've been living in my brother's shadow, resenting it sometimes, but never brave enough to step out on my own." "Where would you go?" "California, maybe, or Oregon, somewhere I can build something for myself," he smiled ruefully. "Besides, three's a crowd, especially when two are falling in love." "Quinn would be devastated if you left," Tabitha said, knowing it was true. Despite their differences, the brothers shared a deep bond. "He has you now." Wyatt patted her hand. "He'll understand, eventually." Tabitha wasn't sure Quinn would understand, but she kept that thought to herself. Instead, she asked, "When will you tell him?" "Soon, after the Harvest Festival next month." Wyatt's expression turned mischievous. "I suspect he might have plans of his own to announce by then." Tabitha blushed, looking away. Though she and Quinn had spoken often of their feelings for each other, neither had mentioned a more permanent commitment. Yet sometimes she caught him looking at her with such tenderness and certainty that her heart would race with anticipation. The day of the Harvest Festival dawned crisp and clear, the aspens in the high country already turning to gold against the evergreen backdrop. Quinn had been mysteriously absent for part of the morning, returning with a secretive smile that set Tabitha's nerves fluttering. As they prepared to leave for town, he drew her aside, pressing a small package into her hands. "A gift," he said, his eyes warm. "For today." Inside the package, Tabitha found a beautiful tortoiseshell comb inlaid with mother-of-pearl in a delicate floral pattern. Quinn, it's exquisite, she breathed, running her fingers over the smooth surface. It reminded me of you, he said. Beautiful but strong. He reached out to touch her hair, which she'd arranged in a simple twist. May I? Nodding, Tabitha handed him the comb. With surprising gentleness for hands accustomed to ranch work, Quinn secured it in her hair, his touch lingering against her cheek. Perfect, he murmured. The harvest festival was even more elaborate than the social had been. Tables groaned with the bounty of local farms and ranches. Contests were held for everything from pie baking to log splitting, and children darted between the various attractions. Tabitha found herself welcomed warmly by many of the same people she'd met at the social, now greeting her as Quinn's young lady rather than a stranger. Mid-afternoon, as they watched the children's sack races, Quinn squeezed her hand. Come with me for a moment. There's something I want to show you. He led her away from the crowds toward a small grove of trees on the edge of town. As they approached, Tabitha saw that a blanket had been spread beneath the largest tree, a picnic basket waiting beside it. What's this? She asked, delighted. A moment of peace amid the chaos, Quinn replied, helping her sit, and privacy for what I need to say. Her heart began to race as he settled beside her, taking both her hands in his. Tabitha, he began, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. These past months have been the happiest of my life. Before you came, I thought I knew what my future held: the ranch, my responsibilities, maybe eventual contentment but never real joy. He reached into his vest pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. You changed everything. Showed me possibilities I'd stopped believing in, made me want more than just existence. Opening the box, he revealed a ring, a delicate gold band set with a single pearl surrounded by tiny diamonds. This was my mother's, he said softly. She made me promise to give it only to a woman of true strength and character, a woman I could respect as well as love. Tears blurred Tabitha's vision as Quinn slid from the blanket onto one knee before her. Tabitha Winters, I love you, your kindness, your courage, your spirit. Would you do me the great honor of becoming my wife? For a moment, Tabitha couldn't speak, overwhelmed by joy and lingering disbelief that this was truly happening. Then, through her tears, she nodded. Yes, she whispered. Yes, Quinn, I love you too. His smile was radiant as he slipped the ring onto her finger, then gathered her into his arms for a kiss that sealed their promise to each other. When they finally parted, Tabitha laughed softly. I never imagined this, she admitted. Never thought anyone would see past my limp to love me. Your limp is part of you, Quinn said, brushing a strand of hair from her face. And I love all of you, Tabitha, every step, every struggle, every triumph that made you who you are. They rejoined the festival hand in hand, their happiness evident to all who saw them. Word of their engagement spread quickly through the small community, bringing congratulations and well wishes from friends and acquaintances alike. That evening, as they drove back to the ranch beneath a sky painted in sunset hues, Tabitha leaned against Quinn's shoulder, contentment washing over her like a gentle tide. I keep thinking I'll wake up and find this was all a dream, she confessed. Quinn's arm tightened around her. If it is, then we're dreaming the same dream. He pressed a kiss to her temple. And I never want to wake up. Back at the ranch, they found Wyatt waiting on the porch, a bottle of whiskey and 3 glasses beside him. He stood as they approached, his smile wide and genuine. Let me see it, he called to Tabitha. Laughing, she extended her hand, the ring catching the last light of day. Your brother has excellent taste, in jewelry and women both, Wyatt agreed, embracing her warmly before turning to Quinn. Congratulations, brother, you've found a treasure. The 3 of them sat on the porch as twilight deepened into night, sharing the whiskey and talking of future plans. When Wyatt finally revealed his intention to leave after the wedding, Quinn's reaction surprised both him and Tabitha. I know, Quinn said simply. I've seen it coming for a while now. Wyatt blinked in astonishment. You're not angry, disappointed that you'll be far away, yes, but angry, no. Quinn refilled their glasses. You need to find your own path, Wyatt. I understand that better than you might think. Relief washed over Wyatt's face. Thank you, that means more than I can say. Just promise you'll write and visit when you can. Quinn raised his glass. To new beginnings for all of us. As they drank to the toast, Tabitha felt a profound sense of rightness settle over her. From the moment she'd arrived in Silverton, rain-soaked and uncertain, to this perfect evening surrounded by the love of her future husband and brother-in-law. Her life had transformed in ways she could never have imagined. Later, after Wyatt had retired and they were alone on the porch, Quinn took Tabitha's hand, his thumb gently rubbing the ring on her finger. "When would you like to be married?" he asked. "Soon," she replied without hesitation. "I don't need a grand wedding." "Just you and this place that's become home," Quinn nodded, understanding as always. 2 weeks from Sunday, the aspen will be at their peak by then. We could have the ceremony here with just close friends and the ranch hands. That sounds perfect. He kissed her then, a kiss full of promise and longing. When he finally pulled away, he rested his forehead against hers. "I never thought I'd find someone who would understand my life here, who would choose it willingly. And I never thought I'd find someone who would see me, truly see me, and love me anyway," Tabitha replied. "Not anyway," Quinn corrected gently. "Completely. I love you completely, Tabitha Winters, every part of you." As autumn painted the mountains in gold and crimson, Tabitha and Quinn were married beneath the aspens on Rocking O Ranch. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, witnessed by Wyatt, Mrs. Farthing, the ranch hands, and a few close friends from town. Tabitha wore Mrs. Farthing's blue dress, now altered to suit a bride, with Quinn's comb securing a crown of wildflowers in her hair. Quinn had built a small cabin a short distance from the main house, close enough for convenience, but far enough for privacy. It was their wedding gift from Wyatt, who had overseen its construction during the final weeks of his recovery. Inside, Quinn had furnished it with pieces both practical and beautiful, including a bookshelf filled with volumes of poetry and adventure stories for Tabitha's enjoyment. Their wedding night was a revelation for Tabitha, who had feared her disability might make intimacy awkward or disappointing. Instead, she discovered that Quinn's patient tenderness extended to this aspect of marriage as well. He worshipped her body with gentle hands and whispered words of love, making her feel beautiful and whole in ways she had never experienced before. Afterward, as they lay entwined beneath quilts against the autumn chill, Quinn traced patterns on her bare shoulder. "Happy, Mrs. Oberlin?" he asked, the new name still sounding wonderfully strange to both of them. "Completely," she replied, nestling closer to his warmth. "And you, more than I ever thought possible." He kissed her softly. "And this is just the beginning." 2 weeks after the wedding, Wyatt departed for California with promises to write often and return for visits when possible. Though his absence left a void, the rhythm of ranch life continued. Winter arrived with heavy snows that transformed the landscape into a glittering wonderland. Tabitha and Quinn settled into married life with an ease that surprised them both, their days filled with work and their nights with quiet companionship or passionate embraces. When spring returned to the mountains, bringing wildflowers and renewal, Tabitha discovered she was with child. Quinn's joy at the news was boundless. He lifted her in a careful embrace, spinning her around their small kitchen before setting her gently back on her feet. "Are you pleased?" she asked, though his reaction left little doubt. "Beyond measure," he replied, dropping to his knees to press a kiss to her still flat stomach. "A child, our child." As her pregnancy progressed, Quinn's protectiveness intensified. He insisted on hiring a young girl from town to help with the cooking, ensuring Tabitha didn't overtax herself. Though she protested that pregnancy hadn't made her an invalid, she secretly appreciated his concern, especially as her changing body made her limp more pronounced. Autumn returned, painting the mountains in gold once more, and with it came their son Samuel Quinn Oberlin, born during the first snowfall of the season. With dark hair like his father's and Tabitha's green eyes, he was a perfect blend of them both, strong and healthy and whole. As Tabitha nursed their son before the fireplace one evening, Quinn sat beside her, his arm around her shoulders, his expression one of wonder and contentment. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket. He withdrew a small velvet pouch, a gift to celebrate our son's birth. Inside the pouch, Tabitha found a delicate gold locket. When opened, it revealed a tiny painted portrait of the three of them, rendered with remarkable skill. "It's beautiful," she whispered, tears filling her eyes. "But when did you have this done?" "Remember when the traveling portrait artist came through Silverton last month? I had him paint it from my description." Quinn fastened the locket around her neck. "So you'll always have us close to your heart, even when we're apart." Tabitha touched the locket, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness of the gift. "I love you, Quinn Oberlin, more each day, and I love you, Tabitha Oberlin." He kissed her gently, then placed a feather-light kiss on their sleeping son's head. "Both of you, you are my heart, my home, my everything." As snow fell softly outside their window, blanketing the ranch in pristine white, Tabitha reflected on the journey that had brought her to this moment. From the lonely, rejected girl limping through the rain in Silverton to beloved wife, mother, and mistress of rocking a ranch, it seemed almost too miraculous to be true. Yet it was true, all of it. The man who held her, the child in her arms, the home they had built together. A life fuller and richer than she had ever dared to dream. 5 years later, as spring brought new life to the mountains once more, Tabitha stood on the porch of their expanded cabin, watching Quinn teach their son to ride his first pony. Beside her, their 3-year-old daughter, Rose, clapped her hands in delight at her brother's accomplishment. Wyatt, visiting from California where he'd established a successful horse breeding operation, stood at her side. "You've built something beautiful here," he said, gesturing toward the thriving ranch and the family at its heart. "We all have," Tabitha replied, including him in her smile. "Different dreams, but all worth pursuing." As Quinn lifted Samuel from the pony with a proud grin, their eyes met across the yard. Even after years of marriage, that connection still sent warmth spreading through Tabitha's chest, love, gratitude, and the deep certainty that she was exactly where she was meant to be. No one had wanted the limping girl, it was true, except for one man whose heart had been large enough to see beyond the surface to the woman beneath. A man who had looked at her and said, without words but in 1,000 actions, "You walk right into my heart," and she had. Step by uneven step, she had walked into love, into family, into happiness. Not despite her limp, but with it the very thing that had shaped her into the woman Quinn Oberlin had fallen in love with that rainy day in Silverton. As her husband and son approached, both smiling widely, Tabitha stepped forward to meet them, her limp as much a part of her as her heartbeat. She moved without self-consciousness now, without shame, because she had learned what truly mattered, not the evenness of her gait, but the steadiness of her love. And in that love, she had found her greatest strength, her truest self, and a happiness beyond anything she had ever imagined possible.